Good day, Internet folks. Is your red blood cell a black hole, or is a black hole a red blood cell? I think for a lot of people, this concept is out of nowhere and there's no reason to even talk about it. But when I was a teenager, that was totally a different story, and I had more ambitions and thoughts and ego to understand what it meant. So, back when I was a teenager, something about 18, 17, 18, 19 years old, I was so focused on getting good grades at high school, getting to my favorite university, and getting into medical school or pharmacy school. And I remember I really wanted to get into dental school, and I don't know why I was thinking that I would do great in dental school. But then there was one day I was sitting in my room that my parent provided for me to study in there and focus and go get your dreams kind of room. My father put a whiteboard on the wall, and it was so big, and I wish like I could have that whiteboard now in my apartment. But I used to write stuff on that board, my planning, my daily summary, and all that jazz. But then one day I was studying mathematics and geometry, and I was going through the formulas, just memorizing, not really caring about what is the depth of it, because that would be your mentality. Like, you need to understand the concept, but you just need to get it done fast so you can pass the exam and move forward. And that's one of the things I hated the most about going to university, because you want to learn more, but you have to wait to get to your master's, or I don't know, your PhD. And undergraduate is all about passing your exams, getting good grades, and that is it for a lot of people. But back then, when I was just studying geometry and I was having a good time with algebra and all that jazz, and I really love it now more than anything, I came across ellipses in different shapes and geometry. I was just drawing it on the whiteboard and writing down the formulas underneath it, and it was so much fun. Suddenly, I stepped back and looked at this shape, and something really strange happened in that moment. I looked at that shape that I drew on the board, and I was like, this looks like a red blood cell. And then I looked at it more, and I said, no, this can look like a black hole. And that was the moment that everything started to collapse, and my idea of education and science and learning changed forever. I was never ever the same person that I was 2 minutes before me drawing that ellipse on the whiteboard. And I remember my heart was racing, and I just sat down and started writing my thoughts on a piece of paper, and I folded it and I put it in my journal. But then when that moment happened in my life, I could not think about normal education, normal math, normal science. The very one question I had in my mind anytime I would study any major in science, I would say, what is the connection between this topic and another topic? And that was when I was introduced to the world of interdisciplinary sciences, which I love the most. And then I got into university, and then I got distracted by passing the exam, trying to survive, paying tuition, and trying to get into med school, compete in this competition that is so nerve wracking. And I kind of forgot about all that passion that I had until one day I was tired and I said, I really want to go back to those days. It was such a great feeling. I was such a different person when it came to science. So I started my book called My Red Blood Cell Was a Black Hole. And I have to say, I made a lot of mistakes as a person, as a writer, as a person who can speak and write English in that book, which is this one. And if I were to go back and truly change a lot of things in one book, I would do it in My Red Blood Cell Was a Black Hole. The language is pretty much written by a person who is writing a PhD thesis and doesn't care that a normal person might be able to read it. But I really loved what happened during that time of me going back, thinking, writing, challenging my brain, and trying to connect the impossibles. And I really didn't want to write My Red Blood Cell Was a Black Hole as a fiction or a science fiction book. I just wanted to write a book about how we can connect two different geometry, and even though it is a little impossible to do it, there are connections, there are meanings in the both worlds that we can understand and learn from it. But then suddenly I realized how much I hated my profs and teachers that would just teach the class without making it interesting. So I wanted people to be interested in reading this story. So I started up creating characters, and that was the first time that I actually went back and used my art. And I was like, I really want to do this. I really want to do this in the right way. And the journey started, and I put myself in the shoes of this teenager who is thinking about concepts like whether a red blood cell is a black hole. And in your mind, you can imagine how the shapes and the geometry could be related, but then on paper in mathematics, that's something that you cannot easily prove. But then we have to understand that a teenager could be biased. We understand that a teenager could be so mentally occupied with a lot of things. Imagine growing up, being scared of being an adult, being scared of finishing high school, what's going to happen next. So that was the story that I thought, well, as a teenager, I was going through all those thoughts. And I was scared if I don't study, if I just switch from actually studying for my exams, I would fail all my exams and then I would end up with nothing. And like you think about all those stuff as teenagers, but what happens if the characters of a story do the same thing? So the story started as a science fiction, the story of a teenager who's graduating high school, and he has this idea and he thinks that his idea is 100% correct, and he thinks a red blood cell can be a black hole. But his journey starts with him and his biased opinion, and he's 100% sure that it's true, to understanding many things about the universe and geometry. And is he going to eventually find the answer for it? Probably. Is he going to like the answer? I don't know. But for me, as a person who wrote the book, I learned more about how a story can take you from one point to another. So I started writing Red Blood Cell was a black hole as the story that teenagers are going to fall in love with each other, and then they are going to go in the library trying to figure out, to the point that I introduced the concept of quantum conscious time dilation within the story. And I never thought that I would eventually get to that point. And then being a key character in the universe, and what is the universe, and meeting this person who travels through time and consciousness, they would learn more about a lot of science than just geometry. So for me as a writer, it was such a great moment to learn that you can, and you would eventually learn a lot, and you would use your imagination throughout the story. And I never actually wanted to write more than one book. I just wanted to write My Red Blood Cell Was a Black Hole because it was something that I was very passionate about. But then I eventually was like, I really need this story to continue. I want the characters to be more than what they are. I would eventually love to go back and change the cover of the book, and I would love to go back and edit it with the knowledge about writing and everything that I've learned in the past 4 years, and redo the book and make it even better. But the one thing that I'm very excited about is that I continue the story, and I did continue the story in the next books. And I'm very excited to bring more.